I'm recording. We're good to go. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, no worries. So just a little bit about myself. These are my kids. We just got, about a month ago, we got some new baby chicks. We've got laying hens, and we wanted to add to our flock. So that's some with a couple of our new baby chicks. As Wendy said, I taught in high school, a traditional classroom out in Los Angeles prior to moving back to Michigan, and I started virtual teaching during the 11-12 school year. So present mode. Yep. Is that better? Can you guys see the present mode, or I think I have to stop. I'll stop and reshare. Hold on. And I'll click, there's some clickable things, so I'll have to kind of stop and go back and forth a little bit, it looks like, but is that better? Okay. All right, so I taught pretty much all the high school sciences. I've done a little bit of middle school. I have most recently been working with my first graders. My daughter's in first grade, and her friends, 2 classes of first graders over the past 3 weeks when they started the shelter at home. And so I just was like, well, I'll do like 3 classes a week of science. And so that's been interesting, teaching first graders when I'm used to working with high school kids. But I also piloted teaching chemistry virtually using modeling instruction, and then coached the teachers through a curriculum moved to modeling instruction at another Michigan virtual school in physical science and biology. So the whole high school started doing that. And currently I'm the principal at Michigan Online School. It's a 6th through 12th grade, 100% virtual school with students all over the state. So I've done some asynchronous virtual teaching, a lot of synchronous virtual teaching, and kind of in between. So to try and figure out how this all looks. So I know Wendy asked for who's all here today. I see some familiar names and faces in the chat. So good to see you guys. I see Brenda and some other people that I know. So fun to see you guys.
You want me to launch the poll and get an idea of who's here? Okay. We'll launch the poll, and if you guys, we'll give you a second. Hopefully it should show right up on your screen, and you can give us full information about you. What is your role in your district? And I know that some of you might have a role that is in between some of them, so just pick the one that best suits you. Can you guys see the poll? I don't have anyone. Can you see it? I don't have anyone voting.
Screen, Amy's
screen.
Screen.
Because you are, yes, because you are sharing your screen. Let's try that again. Welcome to What's Going to Happen Online with Kids, right? Okay, let's try that again. Now, can you see it? Still no. Okay,
no.
I'm going to get one more time.
Launch.
I did launch. It was launched. I'm going to end and try again. Relaunch. We're relaunching.
Well, I want the X.
How's that? There it is. Okay, I got some people voting now. Perfect.
Oh, I can hear you.
I don't know. Just put in the search for now. All right, I'm going to give you about 20 more seconds to see if you can do that, and then we're going to shut that down and take a look at who is with us today. All right, I'm going to shut the poll down, and I will launch the results, and then we can take a look at who's here today. So mostly 6, 8, and 9, 12 teachers, but I'm glad. Look at, we've got 5 K2 friends. I'm so excited about that, and some 3 5s as well. So good. Welcome, elementary folks, and some administrators too. Great. All right, Amy, I will get out of here and I'll let you continue.
All right, can you guys see that again? Okay. All right, so a couple of things, right? Important thing Wendy mentioned to start was that this is all about equity. So we have to remember that for our students. If students are in need of internet help, there is internet help out there. Comcast has something going on, and AT&T. I know not all areas will be served by these two companies, but I do know that they have those like a couple of months free if students qualify for free or reduced lunch. So they are welcome to fill those out to help with internet during that time. Oh, and Wendy, did you put in the chat just the slide deck?
Oh,
so people have access
I'll get that in there in just a sec.
Okay,
Absolutely.
perfect. So then you can just click on that link and have access to those as well. So I also included in here the McCall guidelines for helping classroom teachers transition to online learning. Now, it is like when you transition to online teaching, it does feel like you're learning how to teach again. It's very different. Be gentle with yourself when you're learning this, because it's like your head's spinning, like you're learning how to teach again. So it's not, there are a lot of things that you can translate, but you do have to think back when you started student teaching. You really have to think about how you can implement those things that you already know how to do. So this is just a good graphic that shows what it looks like. So surveying your students, really finding out what their needs are, who can participate in live sessions, who can participate in anything virtual, or what they have access to, the tools that you're able to use. If you want to do some kind of asynchronous or synchronous, asynchronous would be things that you would do with not together. Like this is a synchronous session we're doing right now. So asynchronous could be something that you ask them to do on their own time. And then thinking about just modifying, extending your deadlines, because it really is important to think about when everybody has access. Not everyone might not have access at the same time. They may have multiple students living in their house, or parents who are working on a computer during the day. So thinking about that they might not have access 6 hours a day to get on and do the work. They may be doing it late at night or on the weekends. And so just considering that when you're thinking about deadlines or modifying things. What's really nice about virtual teaching is there's the ability to give a lot of feedback in scaffolds. And so we're going to talk about what some of that looks like in just a second. You can do real world learning because the students are living in an interesting time right now. So there's a lot of really cool things you can do with what's going on around them, outside their houses, in their houses. And then thinking about clear as kind. So that really means that you're being really clear about your expectations. It's really confusing for students if they're not really sure what you expect of them. And so being really clear about how they're supposed to engage and what that looks like, and how they'll be graded, and how they're going to get feedback. And then if you're doing live sessions, having really clearly written out directions about what they're doing. Otherwise, you're going to get a million questions about, oh my gosh, how do I do this? How do I do that? And you'll notice if you're not being really clear, you're going to get a ton of feedback from kids about it. And really importantly, mental health checks, like how are the students doing? How are their families doing? And just checking in on them, because this is just a kind of crazy time. And imagine, you know, us as adults, how we feel about it. Kids dealing with so much other stuff along with what's going on in our environment and our society is a lot for them to handle. And then taking care of yourself. Remember, like, be gentle with yourself. This is hard. So just take your time. You don't need to know how to do everything perfectly. It's not going to be, and that's okay. This is hyperlinked, and let me stop. I'll just reshare here for a second. So this kind of goes into a little bit more detail here on the McCall guidelines about surveying, equity, the tools, if you're thinking about doing asynchronous or synchronous or a combination, and just a little bit more feedback about all of those things. So that's just a resource for you if you need that. All right, so just a little bit about virtual teaching, and I know not everyone is going to be able to do synchronous instruction, and it may not be part of your plan, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, but I found over the years teaching virtually that really synchronous instruction was best for students, especially with the change to our recent three-dimensional science standards. It's really hard to do all 3 dimensions if you're not doing it synchronously. Right, you can do content just like a lecture, but that's just 1 dimension. And so thinking about, if you can, programming in some synchronous teaching is really, really helpful to hit more standards. Get to know your snipping tool. Every computer has a snipping tool. So in your search bar, you can just type in the word snipping tool and pin it to your taskbar. It's at the bottom of my taskbar. I use it all the time because I snip things and put them in my PowerPoints all the time. The other thing that I use a lot is, and this is with teaching students, is virtually is Jing. Jing also has a snipping tool, but I mean, you can use that too. Just takes another snip, but you can make free 5-minute videos on Jing and then send them to students. It's really awesome for teaching students how to do something if they're not sure how to navigate in an online system. So it's super helpful just to do like a little quick snip of you speaking through how to do something. And then no need to try every single new technology. I know we've all been to PD when you go to a session and it's like, oh, all these, and they have like a million technology things listed. It gets a little overwhelming. So just stick with a few and teach the students how to use those. You don't have to do every single thing. Like a lot of the synchronous tools have polling built in, so you can just use that polling tool. And in teaching, right, there's a lot of things you can do in a synchronous session. Or if you're building something in like a Google Classroom, then stick with that. And yes, and if you're sharing, I've got a link at the end also for everybody to share their ideas, which is awesome because I think, right, I don't have all the answers or the ideas, but and I think we all just need to share with each other and learn from each other with this. Also, just keep in mind that things take longer virtually. So wait time in virtual classes is 2 to 3 times longer because you're not only accounting for the students to think, you're accounting for tech issues. A lot of students have slower internet, and so it's delayed 10, 15 seconds at times for them. And so you think maybe they're not engaged, but really all they're doing is having a delay in their internet. And so you have to wait and wait and wait. And then most high school kids, in my experience, do not want to go on the video, and they do not want to turn on their microphones. Now, some of them will. But if that's the case and you are like a typical virtual classroom, then you have to account for the students to type their thinking or their answers out as well, which also just takes longer. The little kids, in my experience, you know, we've got a couple of K2 teachers in here. They will get on the camera and instead, you know, you have the raise your hand button. They'll be like raising their hand in class. It's so cute. So the younger kids will do it a lot of times, but when you get upper level, they won't. The other thing to think about too is that you're going to have to reestablish your norms for virtual classroom because it will freak the kids out a little that they're in this. And like, how do you even navigate in here? Teaching the students how to use the tools takes time. For you to learn how to use the tools takes time. And so it's just going to take a little bit more time to do all of that. All right, were there any questions? Wendy, we should stop.
No, we have some people sharing some things, which you mentioned we'll share at the end too, and kind of get a collection of things for everybody here that we'll share out. But no, as of right now, there are no questions. So keep on going. Amy did a little drink there. Excellent.
Yep. Well, and so you'll notice that I have a background in here. So just a note about that, if you're doing a background, it kind of makes it interesting if you're trying to share something on your camera. So it will like bleep it out. Like I have a whiteboard that I use with my students, but look at what it does. It blinks when I put the whiteboard in front of my camera with the picture. So you might not want to use a background if you're trying to do like a demonstration or a lab, because it won't let the kids see everything that you want them to see.
We did have one pop up there too. Do you have examples of online norms that you might be able to share? You might not have to share them all now, but maybe we can link them in, or maybe a couple of your favorites.
I've got just a slide in here in just a second about just what I used with the first graders. Yeah, it's pretty normal though, yeah. And then, so the first week really is going to be about working with your students on how to use your technology and establishing norms. I think when I first was teaching my students how to use like Google Drive and Google folders and create like a virtual Google Science notebook, it took like a full day, 45-minute class just to have them set it up and organize their stuff. So just remember that it's probably going to take some time for them to figure that out and get organized. If you're using an async platform like Google Classroom or a blog, Desire to Learn, that's D2L, Blackboard, a website, if you're organizing your stuff on like a Google site, I would do a classroom scavenger hunt just to make sure they know where to find all the things in that virtual classroom. It could just be like a quick question like, hey, where do you find this? Go here and come back and put in the chat, when is the first due date for whatever, something you assigned. And I've got a sample of that too on a slide coming up. Google Drive folders are awesome to help students stay organized, and also for them to share their information with you. If you're using Google Classroom, you can kind of associate that stuff together. So there's a lot of different things you can use. This is pretty simple. Kids can upload all kinds of docs and sheets and science data into those folders, and that's helpful. And then I like to put things in there to share with them as well. If you want them to start a virtual science journal, you can use a notes template that you create. I've got a sample in here of that. And you can actually force them, you can force a copy. So I learned this after I took a full day of having them try and make a copy of my Google Doc, and it was a fail. So it's like, how do I just make them force copies? So if you share it, oh, and I heard someone say that yesterday, Google Science Journal. So that may be something that you can add, Heather, to the information at the end, which would be awesome too. But anything, if you want to share any kind of Google Doc that you want this kids to just make a copy of, you can change your settings to shareable with everybody. And then instead of copy in the word, you change that. It's just right in the, up here, it'll say copy, it'll say edit. You just swap copy with that and it'll force them to make a copy, which is pretty cool. And then what I always did is I would, instead of having them share it with me and then having to search for their journal, I had them just put their link right in a Google survey. So all of my students, I had access to their Google journals linked right there, and I could give them feedback. Yep, and yeah, Kelly, you could create an assignment and make a copy for each one too. Yep, and depending on how many students you have, right, it's gonna depend on how much time. This is just a norms that I did with the first graders. It was just like, if you want to share on the microphone, because we have a lot of people in class, you can go ahead. There's a raise your hand button if you click on the manage participants when you're a host, or you actually can't see it as a host, but if you click on it, you have a raise your hand button. So they just click on that. And then feel free to ask questions. I always encourage students to ask questions as we're going, make mistakes. And then the first graders added to our rules the 3 R's, because that's a thing for their classroom. So they were like, let's do the 3 R's: respect, responsibility, and ready to learn. So we added that on to our classroom as well. And really anything that there's a lot of different options for norms. Here's an example of just a classroom scavenger hunt. I always like to do a welcome video. Students tend to watch videos. They don't tend to read long things that you write. So long emails, posts that you put, like they tend to watch the video and they skip over a lot of stuff in what you write. So just a note about that, that's helpful. Even if you want to just send like a little video out or an audio clip, you can do that via email. And they tend to listen to that. And then I just want to make sure they have information. Where's the syllabus? I always made a Class Connect recording library, so I use Blackboard Collaborate. And what I did is I just made a Google Sheet and I put the name of the class, the topic, what was assigned or what was due that class, and then the link for them. So they had it all in one spot. So if a kid missed, he could just go right into that link and he could watch the recording, or she could watch the recording and know exactly what was due from that class and when, and have a link to their work right there. So that was one thing that was helpful, and I learned that kind of late, and I was like, oh, I got a lot more students watching recordings if they weren't in class that way. All right, so this is my organizing your work with students, just my step-by-step, and this is the be clear and be kind. I think having step-by-step things written out for your students when you're sharing is important so they know what they're doing. Number 1, go to Google Drive, log in. I had this forced copy. This was the sharing their chemistry journals with me, the template, and you can see it has copy instead of edit right there. That'll force copy. And then if you had a folder that you shared with all your students, then you just insert that there. And then for people who don't have Google for their school, I didn't at my previous school either. I just used my own Google personal account and just made it shareable with the students, that folder. And so just my students had access to that and myself. All right, so a couple of Zoom tips if you're going to be using Zoom. First of all, you can rename your students with only their first name. I would recommend it. FERPA is more strict when you're dealing with virtual because everything is written down with people's faces attached to it. So it's really important to consider how you can be FERPA friendly when you're doing online and virtual. I ask students to only sign in with their first name, especially if you're recording something. You don't want them to have their first and last name listed on a recording so that you can share it with other students. Or so they can rename themselves, or you can right click if you're the moderator and you can rename everybody. So that's number 1. Zoom Professional has all kinds of cool settings. If you're using Zoom Professional, it's worth it to me. You can change, you can set up to see who is actually paying attention in the participants list. There's like a little clock next to people's names that shows if Zoom is not the main thing that's up. So it tells you who's paying attention. You can also log in with your phone. And so like log in as yourself on your computer, log in with your phone and set it up like an Elmo. And like you can have a whiteboard down and you can be drawing things and show them on your phone. Or if you have your phone, you can do an experiment and kind of show them while you're talking. Because it's really hard to do it on your webcam on your computer, but it's easy to do it on your phone. So that is also awesome. You can set up, so if So, and I know that that's the case because of the Zoom bombing stuff. So setting it up with a password is, I think, the solution to that. You can change the settings so it's not just a link where everybody can get in. You can also change the settings to allow for people not to get in. So Google Meet, I don't love. There's very little control you have as a moderator. Students can get back into it after the session, just so you know. So if they use that same link, they can come back into the same room to meet with other students. So just note that they can get in. Yep, I know, and I've got a couple more ideas for synchronous things too if you're not allowed to use Zoom. And I just started using Zoom. I've mostly used Blackboard Collaborate. So yeah, exactly. So so they did change it. And okay, so if you have Google for your school, they can prevent that from happening. Good to know. Yeah, you have to mute everything basically if you get feedback. So you had to mute everything on your phone. So like one of your device, like if your phone was your device that you were using, you would have to mute and turn off. And if you are just muted on your phone, you shouldn't get feedback. You also have to turn your volume all the way down on your phone. Otherwise, you're going to get a ton of like that screeching and echoing. Yeah, and I've got a couple other things. I've got a link up here as well for that has some videos. One of the things, if you're using Zoom or you're allowed to use Zoom, you can set up polls ahead of time if you log into the account and after you've set up the session. So that's pretty nice. You can pre-set up breakout rooms and pre-assign, like you can upload a CSV file of student names and pre-assign those so it's super quick instead of having to do it manually. So that's really nice too if you're allowed to use that. All right, taking a sip. So teachers have a bag of tricks, right? You use the same things and you found things to work in your classroom. You can do most of those things in a virtual classroom. You just might have to modify it or think how you can translate that into your virtual classroom. So whatever platform you're using, you can do think, pair, shares, meaning like have a student pair with another student in a class and choose that and have them do a think, pair, share if you're having a hard time getting students to respond. You can have student leaders. You can create, I'm a co-host right now. Wendy made me a co-host. You can have student leaders in your classroom be a co-host, help facilitate discussions, support breakout rooms. They can move between breakout rooms to help. They can manage chat. Yes, and you will. This is all, this is linked, so you guys will have access to this. Oh, thanks, Kelly. So student leaders are awesome to help, especially if you have a large virtual class, anything over 50, it's helpful to have a co-teacher or a student leader. You can do a waterfall, ask a question, everyone waits, and then you say waterfall, and then they hit enter, and and it's a waterfall of chats all at the same time. Asking them for a green check if they have, if they're ready, like, hey, let everybody get your paper and pencil. We're gonna be doing some drawing today. Make sure you have markers or colored pencils, and then give me a green check once you're ready to go. And this tells you if everybody's ready, if they have the supplies, if they're listening, and who's participating. Gallery walks are awesome virtually. I got a lot of great participation from a gallery walk, and having students collaborate on a shared Google slide presentation or a Google Doc. Each student can choose a different color or add their question or comments in a different color depending on the type of question that they're asking. I have students either use a whiteboard or paper. This is my whiteboard, now I can't see it. Use a whiteboard, I use a whiteboard and draw on it, and then have the students tell me what I should be drawing. or we're talking about a model and I can modify it. And then they share, you can spotlight students' cameras. If you right click on the video, you can spotlight them. And so it's really nice. It lets them share their ideas and their thinking with each other. The first graders love doing that. And then co-teaching. It's amazing to be able to co-teach with a special education teacher, ELL teacher, another teacher in the same content. You're both teaching biology or physical science, or someone that's teaching another content, and you can cross-collaborate on a project together. So we've got more flexibility, I think, with content right now. And so it's an awesome time to kind of try out some of those things you've been thinking about and wanting to do. Yes, awesome, Tom. So in Google Docs, you can change from, it's like the suggesting mode from edit, yeah. And then or write comments on each other. So teaching the kids all those tricks in Google Docs is awesome. Breakout rooms are amazing with students. They are management. But even virtual teachers I found are a little freaked out for doing breakout rooms. So don't be scared of them. I did them just about every day with my students. They love them, just being able to work together in a smaller group or a collaborative project with their peers, and then for you to be able to just give them some time to work on their thinking together. You might want to think about doing breakout rooms with either a set group of students in the same breakout rooms, or you can set those up ahead of time and have students assign. You can also swap kids if you set up an automatic breakout room and then switch kids around before you actually start them. Wendy, did you have something?
Yeah, so I don't know if everybody has their chat open. If you don't have your chat open, Amy's been going back and forth. It's hard because that's how she taught, going back and forth to make sure she was checking on the kids. We were going to take breaks to do that, but I think that's just something that Amy just naturally does because it's part of what she always does. So if you don't have that chat open the chat. It should be on the bottom of your toolbar when you wiggle your mouse, so that as she goes back and forth with that conversation that she just naturally does anyway, you can make sure that you know what she's talking about. So yeah, that's it.
Good point. So I'm really used to just looking at the chat. Yeah, we can save the chat, Wendy, and that can be shared too. So, and you can save the chat. That's another nice thing, which is helpful as a teacher in case you need to just make sure that you have a copy of that. Yeah.
And we had a couple questions about the breakout rooms. The facilitator, if it's my understanding, I think we can go in and out of breakout rooms, right? But you can't be in all of them at one time. Is that how it works when you're on the facilitator side of things? Yes. So okay. You can hop in and out of any breakout room as a facilitator. Mm-hmm. When you open breakout rooms, any co-host or host will not be distributed to the breakout rooms, but the co-host and the host can move to any breakout room. So if you want someone to be is a teacher or is helping or is a student leader and you want them to be able to go into some of the rooms and help, then make them a co-host so that you can do that. Okay. And then and I think of it the same as like in a classroom, right? When you're walking around listening as students are working together, you can't hear every single thing that's going on in the classroom, but you can kind of pop around and check on kids that are working. Okay. Yeah, and they can ask for help in those breakout rooms too, correct? So yep. Teaching kids how to use this tool, if they use it, is going to be, they might need some low-key practice, it sounds like, and we will probably too. It's teachers. Super easy for the students actually, because I did it with first graders. I'm like, we're just doing this. Let's see how they do. And the first graders who, have very little computer, like they've done a little bit, but they went in and out of breakout rooms. They clicked the I need help button because it's just right there at the bottom of their screen. And then when they click the I need help button, it pops up for me as a moderator, and I just click the button and go there right away, and it moves me right into that breakout room with the student that said they needed help.
And then if you need to swap kids, you can do that really easily and quickly. And you can close the breakout rooms, and it gives them just a pop-up that says like that they're ready to exit the breakout room. It's going to close in 1 minute. You can change that time in your settings from like 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And then also you can broadcast like a mass message to everyone in the breakout rooms, like, hey, we're gonna have 15 minutes to work in the breakout rooms, or we've got 2 minutes left, or whatever you'd like to say.
Amy, I'm going to keep typing the answers. I know the answers to them, and I have you just keep on going because there's a lot of information here, and I want you to be able to go. And if there's something that I can't answer, then I'll chime in for you.
Okay. Exit tickets, you can do those easily on a shared collaborative Google slide or a Google form, and I've got some samples of those right here. So this is like something I've done in Google Slides, and the students just pick a line, and then they just type in, you know, did we meet our objectives, what I thought, describe something a classmate said that helped deepen your thinking, and how did the new information change what I think? So just like a reflection as they leave the class. I've done breakout room exit tickets where they work together and they complete their group information and their slide together before they leave. And then I've also done Google Forms for reflection or for just a quick quiz on what they're learning. I don't know if there's anything about, I don't know much about Google Meet, if there is, but it would be from what I've seen with most synchronous platforms is that if there's a setting, it's usually in the admin tools, and you usually have to log in as an administrator and change your settings. Yeah, and it depends on what you're using. So sometimes if you want to do some kind of you know, breakout, maybe you set up multiple Google rooms and you kind of pop in and out of those Google rooms, and you give the kids a link like, hey, these kids are going to go work in this room, and you can pop in and out of those sessions. So gallery walk examples are if you share your Google Slides with your students, they can kind of walk through the slides of other groups as they've added their information, and then just move through those slides and then just write down on their own sheet of paper similarities and differences, come back to the main slide and share what they noticed. That's one gallery walk. I've also done where you have gallery walk. Students are choosing a different color text or in that suggesting mode, and they just add information that way. Choosing a different color text for different kinds of comments. So like a blue text for positive comments, pink for clarification, green for questions, or I've done like probing questions and clarifying questions in different colors. And so just making it really clear what you want them to do as they make comments. I also put the minimum of 3 other room slides so they don't just, you know, skip over it, but they know like they should be at least looking at 3 other groups. So I know that some people are limited to 30-minute synchronous lessons. You can do it. Now keep in mind, it's helpful to have a structure set up ahead of time so you don't have to waste time kind of figuring out what you're doing next. So having like a shared PowerPoint done, thinking about how students are interacting during short time together, because, and I know this is more like a lecture, which I don't love to do, but I know there's a ton of people in here and I want to share as much information as we can in the time we have. But if you think about short classes, like you want to think about what is most important for them to do in collaborative time together, and having a teacher just speak to them, you can record that and send it out to students. You don't need to use that as a synchronous time. And so thinking about being able to have students work together on their thinking, have them collaborate, a discussion of some sort. And then so it can be really welcome, maybe a phenomenon, students working together, and an exit ticket, a reflection of their thinking so far. You could even send them out to do a gallery walk on the shared slides, and then next time come together to discuss and come to consensus. And don't be afraid to stretch things out over multiple live sessions, because that's what tends to happen if you really want deep engaged thinking and learning going on. Okay. So I've got a Padlet here, and Wendy, you want to put that in the chat?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So go ahead and add to the Padlet some things you're thinking of trying synchronously. This is also, Padlet is one of those things I've used a lot for driving question boards or clues charts, things like that for science. You can also, if you have a Google Classroom, if you go into your settings up here, you can click on that. You can embed it. If you have a blog or a website, you can embed it in there. You can share it to your Google Classroom as well. So it's already embedded in your Google Classroom to come back and reflect on. But the first thing you're going to want to do when you go in there is just click the plus, and it's going to pop up here. You just write the title and then write your answer there. That's it. You can also change the settings to not allow for students to have like bad words come up. It'll like bleep them out. So just something I would probably do with students. But I'm going to go to that just so we can see. And this will pop up as people write on it. So it's real time. So I actually like to show this as students are typing their ideas and their thoughts.
I love how it's filling in.
Mm-hmm.
Yay.
And you can choose how you want it to fill in. So I think I chose to have like the newest ones pop up at the top, but you can choose the opposite, or you can choose, there's like a bunch of different settings you can choose. Oh, I saw meditation. So I've got one on meditation in a second too. As you're thinking about that. Oh, and someone from anatomy, yeah. I've got a couple of ideas for some virtual labs and things too.
Well, this is kind of exciting too, to think about, even when we were back in front of kids, right? Like, these are really great tools you're adding to your bag of tricks, which is just, it's a lot of fun, right? And to me, I can see it in the classroom, and it's kind of fun to do it online.
And something to think about too is that some students may not have access to a computer. Most students, in my experience in high school anyways, have a phone, and they can typically get into you know, watching a video or participating in a synchronous lesson if it has an app that they can use, like Zoom or Ring Central. Oops. I think we got, hold on. All right, going back. I think someone else was screen sharing. All right, awesome idea. So keep those up. We can come back to those. So So here's some synchronous options for virtual teaching. I know we talked about Zoom and some districts are not allowing this. Zoom did change their settings so that you have to have a password. Ring Central Meetings is another option. It's powered by Zoom. It has a lot of the same functions. This is what I use. And I really like it. Breakout rooms and all the pre-settings and things like that. GoToMeeting, Big Blue Button is a really cool Synchronous, Neuro. These are paid though, they're not free. And then I know Google Hangouts, you guys talked about that, or Google Meet. And so something to think about too is that you'll want to practice the platform with someone before. You can practice as a participant and as a moderator, and you can kind of switch with someone. So a colleague, your spouse. I did this with my husband when I first started virtual teaching. I was like, can you join as a participant so I can see what it looks like and so I can try this out? Just practice it with someone, because then it'll kind of get your nerves out about it. A lot of times, and this was the case for me, like I started tutoring a student in a session because one-on-one it was a little easier for me to figure out some of the tools. And then they also taught me a lot of the tools too. They were like, oh, miss, try this. So the students will help you too. Like they'll be like, oh no, do this, do that. And they're really great about it too. Asynchronous distance learning. So it can be helpful between synchronous learning to do some asynchronous instruction. And some people may only have access to do asynchronous things. So just sending out a weekly schedule of what to do, like a checklist for families on what they should be doing each day, including like if you're having a weekly or a couple of times a week synchronous session, what times those are on the schedule as well. Video directions are helpful to send out instead of the written things. Students will watch those. They don't tend to read a whole email, and I feel like that's the same with adults. So just thinking about doing a quick video, driving question boards after phenomenon, discussion boards, you can send out phenomenon in a video, or just even a picture with a question. Informational readings, videos to support learning, writing or explaining their thinking surrounding a phenomenon. And then opportunities for students to show their understanding of the content so far. So formative or summative assessments, you can do those offline. You don't need to do those in a synchronous session. Students working in groups and collaborating on a group project is also really great for Google Meets or whatever platform you're using. If you don't have tech, and also just remember, most students will have a phone at least. That's pretty much the case. I know there are some students that don't. And so thinking about making that equitable for everybody and what you can do if those students don't. But having them do a research project, a book study, bird observations with a life observation journal, nature walks and writing reflections, dissections. I did this with my students virtually. The warm-up was like one day, call your local butcher and see if they have heart and lungs that they can donate to you. And then we did a dissection together. And I said, if you can't get it, still come, I'll dissect on the camera. Just use saran wrap all over everything. And we walked through dissection together. The students who could get heart and lungs from their local butcher then just took pictures or a video of them doing it and sent it in for extra credit. So, and then seat and watching, this is like someone was talking about meditation. This is basically like meditation, but this is hyperlinked to what this is. So seat and observation for anybody that has gone to like this Ernest Thomas Seton is a guy who, that's what this is about. It's a special way to observe what's happening around you. So it just talks about doing this with students. It's basically meditation. And it's really amazing to do it with students. So just like being out in nature and thinking and smelling and hearing and just sitting. and really thinking about that mental health piece too of that. Yeah. And then phone check-ins. Students don't always answer the phone. Sometimes it's a text check-in. But you can use, there's Remind app you can use that as texting if you're not comfortable using your phone. And I would just go with what your district's telling you should be using. And then I know there's a lot of other ideas. These were just some basic things I was thinking about. Yes, and so if you have other ideas, I want you guys to add those at the end, which we don't have that many more slides, and then we'll get to that part. So some of the best tech I found, yep, Google Voice as well. In this, again, keep it simple, stick with something and try it and teach your kids how to use it. It's Google Drive or Google Classroom with shared folders, collaborating on docs and presentations and sheets. I use a lot of shared spreadsheets for data collection and graphing, teaching the students how to make a graph from a Google sheet. And each kid gets their own tab on the bottom of the sheet, and then we just walk through it together. Google Forms for formative or summative assessments. And I have a link in just a minute on how to create a Google form that's either graded or that you can grade yourself. Padlet for driving questions, which we just did. A synchronous platform to teach live, whatever that is, and however you can do that. EduCreations is a really nice way of having students explain their model or their understanding of a concept, drawing their thinking. It gives them like a whiteboard. They can draw and write and type, and then their voice is recorded, not their face. So you can hear them explaining what they have down. And then thinking about getting students exposed to different careers in science. So like Skype a Scientist, and they'll come into any platform you use. So once you sign up for Skype a Scientist, they will connect with you. And I've had them use Blackboard Collaborate. I just gave them the link and they just popped in and talked with students on whatever platform I had. So also students' parents are home right now. So if anybody wants to present and talk to the students about their specialty or what they work in, it's a great opportunity to be able to have, get students' parents involved as well. Oh yeah, and in Skype a Scientist also, besides signing up for like a specific specialty or area, they'll do, they have like live sessions you can just sign up to go to at certain times. So it's awesome. We met the material scientist for Impossible, the Impossible Burger before it was huge. That was a couple of years ago. And I was like, what is this? And now it's so funny that it's like all over the place. So that was an interesting session. Go ahead, Wendy.
I had someone raising their hand, and then they just unraised their hand.
Lori.
Lori, okay, was that an accident or on purpose? If it was on purpose, go ahead.
Looks like maybe it was. You've got to unmute,
Okay.
Lori, to have a question.
Oh, can you unmute? Yeah, Lori's, where'd you go?
Yeah, so that interactive simulations, it doesn't work on every platform. Now, some of them are better than others. There's some that are HTML, so they work on most platforms. So most of the new ones do work. Sometimes you have to try it out and see, depending on the simulation, if it will work. In some cases, like I've had one student be able to run it and another student not. So I just made sure that if there was a student who couldn't run the simulation, that they worked with another student who could run the simulation, and then that student shared their screen and they worked on it together. So that I've also shared my own screen, and the students can request to take over my mouse and they run it from my computer. And so that's another way to do it. If it's not working on their computer and it's working on your computer, have the kids come in and meet with you, and they can interact with it on your computer by taking over your screen. So you can allow that setting. And then this is just linked to some phenomenon sources. Concord Consortium has some really cool interactive stuff on there. And then Connected Bio, this is coming out in July, so it's not out yet, but it's going to be with some really cool stuff for biology. Data Nuggets. If you want access to the teacher guides for Data Nuggets, there's really awesome teacher lessons on here. You have to complete the form, but you have to give them 2 to 3 days to access it, because they didn't want this to be accessible to students, because that's what they were finding. So you've got to request access to the teacher guides ahead of time, and then they'll send you those. Yeah, I love it. They're awesome. If you've got students who are very advanced or who are wanting to work towards college readiness, or they're just ready to move on with stuff, then MIT OpenCourseWare has awesome undergraduate and graduate level courses that they can work on their own. They're free. And there's a whole bunch of other OpenCourseWare out there, but for science, I really love the MIT OpenCourseWare stuff available. And I've had students from 7th graders, yes, 7th graders who are very advanced, up till seniors work on MIT OpenCourseWare and do really well, and like loved it. So these were a couple of questions that were submitted. How do we give students hands-on science experiments via distance learning? It's going to look a little bit different, but you can do simulations. That's still hands-on if they're able to manipulate and play with it. You can do demonstrations yourself and have the students just tell you what to do. Tell you how, I've got all this equipment, what should I do with it? If you can tell them ahead of time, some students might be able to do home labs with you. And this was my experience, that not all students had the equipment. So I just said, if you have it, great. If you don't, I'm going to have the equipment here and we can do it together. And you can come in and see what we're doing on the webcam. They can do observation activities at home, anatomy and physiology, dissecting. Butchers will usually donate that stuff if it's students. And like when I did it, I just said, here's my number, here's my name, just tell the butcher if they need to call me to verify, then they can call me as the teacher. And then how do we effectively model our standards via distance learning? I really did find that this is really best done synchronously if possible with asynchronous supports. And then what do assessments look like? Depends on your platform. Google Forms works well. I made a quick jing on this here on how to do that and how it looks, and you can make it automatically graded, or you can make it hand graded. So it's pretty cool. And I've also done that for like the pre and post test and modeling instruction as well. All right, so I know that was a lot, but we are at, what are some questions you have surrounding distance learning? And then also at the end of our slide, we've got resources or ideas to share on this sheet. If you have anything else you want to just add to this folder, I'll leave it open for everyone. I won't ever close it. You can add things in there, folders. And then if you need more help with something specific, fill out this forum and we'll share it. Wendy will share it with all the science leaders in the state. We want to be able to gather things that are helpful for everybody, so that everybody can provide you with what you need to be successful in this transition.
You're on it. I just had one I was going to put in the chat that's separate, but we'll use yours. Thank you. Yeah, we do want to continue this. And one of the things that I do want to mention is you might not know what you need yet. Here in Michigan, we haven't started, right? Plans are being written and approved by ISDs and RESOs, and then you have to meet with your staff. A lot of you are still on spring break. So this is a situation where you might not know yet. And if you don't know, that's fine. But you can fill out that form later. We would like to support you, but we also don't want to overwhelm you with opportunities. So whatever you think you might need to put in there, we will try to find people to help you with that. I think, if you want a tech Q&A session, after you get into this and you're having, or office hours with some tech people, if you don't have an ISD or RISA that can help you with that, we certainly at AMTA can figure out how to make that work. If there's particular situations that you really do need help with immediately, the first step would be to contact your district and the people who help you there. And then if you need to move over to the ISD questioning people like myself, and there's a lot of the rest of us on the call. I saw Minna and Laura. We will help you, put you in position to people like that. And the nice thing about us is we have networks across the state. So we've got people like Amy that we can grab and say, Amy, I don't know what to do. I need your help because you've done this. And so that's make sure that, that there are people that are willing to help you. But don't feel like, if you're like, I don't even know what to do yet. I don't even know what I need yet. That's okay. It's an okay place to be. All right. We got some questions. I'm going to take a peek at the chat here because I was talking. I'll put the link back in the chat to the Google Docs or to the Google Slides. Let's see, we're teaching. Okay, it looks like, okay, we've just got a lot of people sharing, which is good. If you've got a question, you can post it in the chat. Is there anybody who would like to unmute their mic and ask a question to Amy?
Amy, to start this, if we cannot do it, if we have to do it asynchronously, what would be the best way for us to start this? What would you suggest doing first? Just a simple survey?
Yeah, I would start with a survey and find out where your students are. That's always, I think, the most helpful is just, you've got to get a pulse of what you're dealing with. What do the students need? Where are they at? Are they doing okay? Yeah, survey is what I would start with.
Summative assessments is a question in the chat right now. You gave a lot of formative pieces. Maybe are there some summative assessment ideas?
So I've done summative assessments in a Google form. I've done even a modeling summative assessment I've done in a Google form with, oh, hey, Brian, W. Seeing some modeling buddies down there. But with a multiple choice and then explaining my thinking surrounding my answer about this. So I've done building it in like that. So if you think about however you're assessing your students in a classroom, you can do that virtually. I've even done a Google Doc, like a Word document that's a Google Doc that you send to each student and then they turn into you. If you're using something like Zoom, you can share files with students in the chat. So you can send out a mass doc to students and share that with them and then have them email that back to you or put it in a Google Drive folder or submit it in a form. If you create a Google form, you can actually have it set up for students to attach a file to submit to you. So they send a file to you as well, which is really nice to get it in one spot that way too.
A lot of people are sharing what they're doing in the Google chat, which I think is great, so people can think about things like that. Jamie asked about Google Classroom and Google Class, or a survey through Google Classroom. I mentioned, yeah, you can push anything Google out in a Google Classroom. I might make the survey on a Google form. I don't know if other people have used it, or on a Padlet or something like that. You have to send that out through the Google Classroom itself. Anyone else I'll give you another few seconds to unmute if you want to ask another question.
I did have a question. I walked away for a quick second. Are you emailing us the PowerPoint presentation with everything in it so we can go back and look through and, all of your links
Yeah.
and your sites and all that happy stuff?
Yes, with the email, the follow-up email, as long as you registered to the Eventbrite, will have we'll have the Google slide deck link. It will have the video if you want to forward that to anybody, if anyone asks you about that and didn't have it, and then I will download the chat too, so you can have access to all of that.
Perfect. Thank you.
How do you set up breakout rooms in Zoom?
Ahead of time or at the time?
At the time.
So you have to change your settings in like the administrator, like you have to log in online to your Zoom administrator settings.
Okay.
Turn on the ability for you. That's where all your settings are.
Right.
So you have to make sure that that setting's turned on to have breakout rooms, and you'll see a button at the bottom that says breakout rooms, and you just click on it, just like down where it says participants and chat and all of that. You click on the breakout rooms, and you can either do an automatic one where it will distribute like everyone in a group of 3-4 students, or you can manually assign students to breakout rooms. There is a video in my slide deck. There's a link that says like Zoom tips and tricks, where Zoom is hyperlinked to the Zoom tricks and tips. There's and there's some videos in there on how to use breakout rooms. It's a really helpful video. And then also how to use closed captioning if you have students who need that, or the chat, managing participants, like all of those things are in there.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Can you could set it, Stephanie asked if we can set up your class in Zoom ahead of time. You can. I think there's a couple steps you need to do ahead of time, right, Amy?
Yeah, you can. So if you have it set up, you have to go back into the settings, and you can set up your breakout rooms ahead of time too. So you can upload a CSV file of student names and assign them to a breakout room already. So it's so when you click on breakout rooms, when you get into your session, you just click launch, and it will move all the kids into the breakout rooms that you assigned.
Thank you, honey. I won't do that.
I just muted Missy. I don't think she knew she was not on mute.
Any other FERPA issues we need to think about in Zoom or legally? I know somebody mentioned in the chat, could we have host parents to moderate some of the breakout sessions? I think I wrote down there too. Just make sure that they've been fingerprinted and background checked by your school. That would be something that I would be careful with, because they have to be in the school, and technically this would be school. Anything you post publicly shouldn't have last names or and then double check your picture allowances too. Anything else, Amy?
Yep. So with the parents, we ran into some issues over the years with parents who were moderators. So you do have to be careful of that. Now they can typically, a lot of times parents are going to be sitting next to their student anyway, so there's nothing you can do about that. But having them log in separately with their name, that gets into a little bit of hey, if you want to be in here and just check in on your student, okay. But being in there every day the whole time and asking to be a moderator, not appropriate. I know a lot of teachers get really excited about, oh, look at, I'm doing virtual teaching, and they have their phone and they're taking pictures of their Zoom room, but that's where and then they post it on Twitter. But if you have students with their last names and their faces associated with them, which happens in Zoom, you don't want to post that publicly. So that's why I say rename everybody. Rename everybody with just their first name, so you're not dealing with that on a recording if you record a session. So that it's just their first name and their photo, and you're not sharing that publicly, it's just shared with the class.
I have someone raising their hand, but I can't see who it is.
Yeah, quick question.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. is there a way, we're using Google Meet for better or worse. Is there a way to permanently disable a link that you've used for a Meet after you're done with it? I know there's a way to if you use a nickname to create it on the Google Meet, like meet.google.com, then nobody can get in or out unless you've started the meeting and are in there. But if you did it through Google Calendar, apparently, I haven't figured out a way to disable that meeting link once you're done with it. I mean, students can apparently just go back in and meet on their own. So is there some secret that somebody might know about how to make it, not useful at all afterwards?
I don't know. I have not used.
Yeah. Somebody posted earlier that that's an admin thing, that they've fixed
think it
that,
is.
but the administrator of the account might have to actually do that. Oh, and Stephanie just posted that I don't know the answer to that one. That's a different question. So somebody said that was an administrator thing. So I would ask your tech world if they can somehow once you're done with it, it can be eliminated. Oh,
Oh,
Lene
it looks
joined.
like, yeah, Lene, did she just post something about that? Maybe she has a link in chat.
Yep.
So you guys probably see me looking over to the side a lot. The other thing about teaching virtually, I can't do it without two screens. Because what I do is I have my chat and my participants to manage my students on my other screen, and I have my main thing on my main screen. So it's really helpful if you can have a second screen. They're cheap. It's worth it. If you're going to be doing this for, a little bit, then it's worth it to have a couple of screens.
And Stephanie also asked, if you delete from Google Calendar, does it delete from your students as well? I think if it's linked to your students, if you've invited them via your Google Calendar, it should also delete your students.
Google Calendar, once you cancel a meeting, it deletes from everybody's calendar.
Okay. I'm going to ask $1 million question that we really didn't touch on is, how much do you think you can actually get through given the amount of time that we have? And I'm going to preface it with, we've already heard plan, cut in a third. I think that's been all over social media. But when you're doing, for your typical classroom, because it's a combination of asynchronous and synchronous, what do you usually get through? Like half the amount, 75% of the amount? What's the high end? What's the low end? And then Lene has a question after that.
Okay, yeah. So everything goes slower, right? And if you're just learning how to do this, everything is just that much slower. So just know that it's just going to take a while. And I would say on a normal end, probably half of the content if you have a really engaged group of kids, probably 75% of the stuff you can do. But I would say that's even on the high end. Even I had a group of students, I was teaching honors chemistry, and we probably only got through 3/4 of what I wanted to do with them. And they were on it. They were engaged. They were meeting offline together to work on stuff, and we still only got through 3/4 of the stuff.
So, and also, you guys know this, right? Because you're dealing with it at your homes too, but there's, parents are in some cases leaving kids at home all day and they're coming home because they're both in the medical field, or there's one parent that isn't in the home because, I have a consultant whose husband is staying outside of the home while he works outside because he's a pretty high risk. So there's a lot of interesting family situations, to just be cognizant of that as you do this. Jamie mentioned that she said they're aiming for only 45 minutes a week in their district, and there are actually state limits based on grade level of how much students can actually do per day based on your planning. So you'll get those parameters from your district as to how much you can plan for. So really consider what can be done synchronously and asynchronously. And remember too, whatever you pushed out, if you chose to push anything out, which you were not required to do prior to whenever your district says you have to, none of that technically should be counted unless you re-push it out and all kids can do it. So if you gave these options for kids to do, I know some of you are doing like AP stuff. I'm going to push that one to the side and let you deal with your AP however you're dealing with it, because you're getting those kids ready for a test. But technically you're not, those pieces up until you start the official launch in the next couple of weeks were technically supposed to be optional, which is amazing that if you're pushing anything out, because I think some parents are happy about that. But just remember that. Yeah, and Jamie mentioned credit, no credit in her district. I think a lot of that's happening. Your district will make decisions on the grade piece too, for how that's moving forward. That's all local control. So. Any other, oh, Lene, you had a question. Sorry.
I actually had a comment back when
Okay.
you were talking about, thinking about FERPA and keeping kids safe. The other thing to consider with that is, as teachers are using different digital tools, please keep in mind permissions. You need to know if they're creating accounts and sharing on those sites, if they need to be 13-year-old or older, and it's not legal for their parents to do an account for them, just to sidestep that. So I can post some links in there if that's interesting to people, if they need kind of a list of what's approved and what's not. But that's something to consider as you're pulling digital tools to be using in your classrooms.
Yeah, ones that aren't already being approved by the district, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, that's excellent. Any other questions? I feel like I had one more thing I was going to mention and I can't remember what it was. So that's awesome, but you know how that goes right now. Okay, so I think we're in pretty good. Yeah,
sorry.
go for it. Go for it.
I just had one more quick question, Wendy. So I'm in Utica schools, and like you have already mentioned, we don't have our game plan yet. It's going through the ISD and all that happy stuff. Looking down the line, when we get that directive, maybe hopefully next week, will there be other opportunities to gather like this and specifically go through that with, say, you or Amy or someone else to guide in that way, or
We certainly
for
could.
upcoming sessions, I mean, I guess.
Okay. Sure. I mean, we certainly could do that if we think that's helpful. I just want to make sure that you want and need that. I don't want, this is going to be overwhelming for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and as you know, a huge learning curve. So if you think connecting back together, and the question would be with who, I want to be very careful with Amy's time, because she's a full-time administrator in an online school, and also teaching some first grade, and she actually never stopped because they were an online school. They didn't have to worry about COVID, so she's actually in full-time teaching mode, or full-time admin mode, I should say, a little bit of both. And so I don't want to take up too much of Amy's time in the process, but I certainly can get others on the call that we might need to take a look at those plans, or we can get a group of people that might be helping you do that if you don't have those people in your area. I think Amy's Google Doc on the slide asks what you need next. If that's one of them, Missy, just let us know.
Okay.
You can always reach out to me via email and ask me know, and I'll either put you in contact with who you might need to in your area, or I can help you. So we'll figure it out.
And then Lisa,
Awesome. Thank you.
one more question that I forgot to talk about, that we talked about yesterday, but it was, what can you expect for students who come and participate? And Wendy kind of brought it up at the beginning, like, I would say on a normal day, about 50% of my students showing up. Now, when I did modeling instruction virtually, I had 80% of the students show up, but that's because they knew they had to be there. And they wanted to be there because they were working together on their thinking. And so they made time to come. But when around spring break time, it's about 25% engagement in a live session. That's 25% of the students showing up. It's really hard, right? When you're here and the students are all over the place, like, you can't just go out in the hallway and say, get in class. They have to come into your class and into the virtual class. So it's like, you also want to think about that. How are you engaging students to want to come into the class to engage in their thinking? Because many of them might not, but also think about that some of them have other kids in the house and they might not be able to get on at the same time. So if you can record, I know some people said they weren't allowed to. If you can, it's really helpful because then the kids can come back and watch it. I had a student, straight A student, do awesome in my class. She only watched my recordings. And I made sure to be able to set up my class. Even during breakout rooms, I had a group of students stay in the main room. So she was a part of a group in the main room and she watched the thinking of the students on the recording. And she could participate with a group even though it was watching a recording. And so sometimes you might think the kids aren't engaging in their thinking and in the learning, but until you do a formative or summative assessment and really see where they're at, a lot of times they're real quiet, but they're thinking really hard about what's going on. So yeah, thinking about that is important.
We had a question that I appreciate that. That was the thing that I couldn't remember. So I'm glad you brought it up. We had somebody ask about taking attendance as kids come in. You can set your Zoom up if you Zoom. Now, I don't know what Google Meet does because I haven't used it, but you can set up a waiting room in Zoom. So, and then you can let kids in as they log on, and then you could take attendance. I would think too that there's probably an asynchronous way to do that too. Like fill out the Google form and just check, here's the Google Doc, just check that you're here today. And then you can go back to it. A little bit of trust on your kids' part, but I mean, I think they'll all be pretty okay with that right now. So those are a couple ways to do it. I'm sure there's a lot of other ways too.
Yeah, and there's a new button in Zoom with security, which that's new. That just came up after all this stuff happened. And when you click on it, you can lock your meeting. So you can enable no one else to come in. And you can enable your waiting room that way too, so that you are allowed to admit everybody or not.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, we're getting close to that 4 o'clock mark. And so I'm going to say a huge thanks to Amy. This is, by the way, Amy's spring break too. And she didn't get the break the rest of us.
I'm on the beach.
So she is. She's on the beach at home with her kids. It's amazing. So we appreciate your expertise, Amy. Thank you so much for spending today with us. Please let us know if we can support you in any other way. Hopefully you'll see a few consultants on here to do that. If you need help at the ISD or RESA level, we're there for you. And fill out that Google form Amy created in the slide deck when you get a chance, or it doesn't have to be now, so that we know what you might need next if you want to connect. Our first 2 ideas were in the future are maybe just in a week or 2 to connect, maybe 2 weeks probably, so you can get set up. Maybe just connect and network with one another around the state in breakout rooms on what you're doing, what works and what doesn't. And that might be our first kind of back together, but we'll look at the Google Doc and see. So we appreciate your time, everybody. Stay safe. Enjoy this. I got snow today, so hopefully none of you have it either. But if you do, I'm sorry. So just get warm again someday. All right, you guys have a good one. Thank you again, Amy. I'm going to end meeting to all. Y'all have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.
Back to the chat.